Somewhere beneath these mountains is a grave that has defeated empires, archaeologists, satellites, and every search technology humanity has ever invented. 800 years of searching, nobody has found it, and the man buried there once ruled nearly a quarter of the known world. If someone finds it tomorrow, it could become the greatest archaeological discovery of the 21st century. At first glance, that seems impossible in the modern age. Modern satellites can detect changes in the ground measured in centimeters. They can spot buried Roman roads from orbit. So how is it possible that nobody can find the grave of the most feared man in human history? Thousands have searched, all of them have failed. Not for the reason you think. Before we solve a mystery, we need a suspect, or in this case, a legend. Around 1162, on the frozen grasslands of what's now Mongolia, a boy named Temujin was born. Legend says he arrived clutching a blood clot in his fist, an omen, his people believed, of a violent destiny. Clue number 1. Nothing about his childhood suggested greatness. When Temujin was still a boy, his father was poisoned by rivals. His own clan abandoned his family, leaving them to starve on the open steppe. For a while, a future world conqueror crawled through the dirt searching for wild onions just to survive. That same boy would one day rule so much land that a messenger could ride for months in a straight line without ever leaving his empire. Which raises a strange question. How does a starving orphan become the most feared man on Earth? Through alliances, betrayals, and a level of battlefield brilliance nobody saw coming. Piece by piece, Temujin united Mongolia's warring tribes. Tribes that had been slaughtering each other for generations. By 1206, the impossible had happened. Every major clan on the steppe bowed to him. They gave him a new name, Genghis Khan, universal ruler. Here's the scale of what came next. At its height, his empire stretched across roughly 24 million square kilometers, about 1/6 of Earth's entire land surface. There's one detail almost everyone overlooks. He also built trade routes connecting east and west and created one of the first long-distance postal relay systems on Earth, capable of moving messages across thousands of kilometers at remarkable speed for its era. That's not the image most people have of Genghis Khan. He also allowed religious freedom across his empire at a time when most of the world was killing each other over faith. Depending on who you ask, he was one of history's greatest monsters, or one of its greatest builders, possibly both, and that's exactly why his tomb matters so much, because buried with him, Mongol tradition says, is treasure beyond imagination. But historians want answers that could rewrite history. Then something unexpected happens. None of that explains why history's greatest conqueror became history's greatest disappearance. In August of 1227, Genghis Khan died. That much historians agree on, almost nothing else they do. He was in his 60s, campaigning in northern China. The most detailed Mongol account we have in a chronicle called The Secret History of the Mongols is strangely vague about how exactly the most powerful man alive actually died. Some sources say he fell from his horse and never recovered. Others claim battle wounds. A later, far more dramatic legend, almost certainly false, claims he was assassinated by a captured princess on his own wedding night. Historians have dozens of theories, but none of them fully agree. Almost all of them depend on stories written decades after his death, by people who weren't there. Very few contemporary Mongol records from this era survive at all. This is where the evidence runs out. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The Mongols weren't writers, they were writers. Most of what we know comes from outsiders, Persian scholars, Chinese officials, European travelers, writing later, often relying on secondhand rumor. That sounds like a small gap. It isn't, because if we can't even confirm how he died, what chance do we have of knowing where he was buried? If you were trying to hide the world's most important grave forever, where would you put it? Underground inside a mountain beneath a river? The Mongols had an even better idea. Picture this: midnight, somewhere on the Mongolian steppe, thousands of horses, not a single torch lit, no one speaks. Somewhere in that darkness, the body of the most feared man alive disappears into the mountains. No banners, no procession for the public to witness. No destination marked on any map. According to Mongol custom, powerful figures were often buried without markers deep in sacred land so their spirits could rest undisturbed forever. This wasn't neglect, it was deliberate sacred design, and it wasn't unique to him. Mongol nobility across the empire were buried this way, in unmarked graves guarded by absolute secrecy. For Genghis Khan, though, his followers didn't just want privacy, they wanted permanence. Now the mystery becomes even stranger. Some historical accounts, although not all equally reliable, describe extraordinary lengths taken to erase every trace of the burial. One legend claims everyone who witnessed the funeral procession was executed to protect the secret. Another says the soldiers who dug the grave were killed by the very escort that brought them home. And that escort in some versions was killed too, a chain of silence enforced by death. Supposedly, 1,000 horsemen then rode back and forth across the burial site, again and again, until the ground was completely flattened. No mound, no disturbed soil, no trace a grave had ever existed. Some versions go even further, describing a small river diverted to flow directly over the site, burying it permanently beneath running water. Here's where we have to be honest with you. Historians can't confirm most of this. The executions, the trampling horses, the diverted river, these come largely from folklore, not first-hand documentation. But the core intention behind them is confirmed, and it's arguably stranger than the legends themselves. His people didn't want him found, but that's not even the hardest part. Even if they'd accidentally left a clue behind, nature spent the next 8 centuries destroying it. Forests grew over it, rivers shifted around it, soil settled over it season after season for 800 years. That's why nobody found it. At least, that's only half the story. If the tomb was hidden on purpose, surely modern technology should have found it by now. It didn't. Governments searched. They failed. But not for the reason you think. Marco Polo wrote about the secrecy surrounding Mongol royal burials back in the 1200s. Explorers spent generations chasing local legends, hoping to stumble onto the site by accident. Cut forward 6 centuries, a farmer swings a shovel into the ground. One strike could change the investigation forever. It didn't. Not that time, but the real hunt exploded once modern technology entered the picture. In the 1990s, a joint Japanese-Mongolian expedition began excavating sites in Mongolia's Khenti province using ground-penetrating radar to scan beneath the soil. If radar can find buried pipes under a city street, why can't it find a grave? Because radar doesn't see objects, it detects density differences underground, and after 8 centuries of erosion and forest growth, those differences become almost impossible to separate from natural terrain. The expedition found ancient graves, just not the one they were searching for. Then came the satellites. In 2010, a research project out of UC San Diego tried something completely different. Instead of digging randomly, they trained thousands of volunteers online to scan high-resolution satellite images, hunting for unusual patterns in the landscape. Researchers identified several unusual anomalies this way. When archaeologists investigated them on the ground, none produced conclusive evidence of the tomb. Still, no tomb. Now comes the impossible part. We can map the surface of Mars in stunning details, and we still can't locate one grave on our own planet. National Geographic funded expeditions, university teams brought in drones, radar systems, and remote sensing technology Genghis Khan's own soldiers couldn't have imagined in their wildest nightmares, because satellites only see the surface. And that's when the real problem begins. Every single search has come back empty. One theory eliminated, then another, then another. So what's actually stopping them? Part of the answer is geography, part of it is politics, and part of it is something nobody expects. The country holding the answer isn't sure it wants it found. Historians believe they already know where the tomb is, so why haven't they simply dug there? Most point to one place, Burkhan Khaldun, a mountain in the Khenti range of northeastern Mongolia. This isn't a random guess. According to Mongol tradition, this exact mountain saved Genghis Khan's life. As a young man, he supposedly hid there from enemies hunting him down and later declared the mountain sacred for protecting him. It would make sense symbolically for his people to return him there in death. That's when everything changes. Even though Burkhan Khaldun is the leading theory, it's barely been touched. Imagine finally identifying the exact location. Every expert agrees, every satellite points there, every scientist is ready to dig. Then the government says no, the entire region is protected. It sits inside a restricted zone, sometimes called the Ik Korigim, the Great Taboo. Forbidden territory where hunting, logging, and unauthorized entry have been banned for centuries. In 2015, UNESCO recognized the wider Khenti mountain area, including Burkhan Khaldun, as a World Heritage Site, citing both its natural and cultural importance. Other theories exist too, scattered across Mongolia's vast, sparsely populated wilderness. None have produced anything close to conclusive evidence. At first, that sounds like an archaeology problem, until you realize it isn't one at all. This is where the investigation takes a completely different direction from an archaeological mystery and into a moral one. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine standing in a forest, somewhere within hundreds of square kilometers of trees, ridges, and unmarked ground. Beneath your feet out lies one grave. That's all searchers are looking for. What if searchers have already walked directly over the tomb more than once without ever realizing it? It's entirely possible. That's how big and how featureless this search area really is. For 8 centuries, forests have grown, rivers have shifted, mountains have weathered, and generations have come and gone. Until today, there isn't a single stone that can confidently point to where the greatest conqueror in history was laid to rest. Nothing. There's one detail almost everyone overlooks. Unlike Egyptian pharaohs who left inscriptions, maps, and monumental architecture practically pointing at their tombs, the Mongols left nothing on purpose. Secrecy wasn't an accident, it was the entire design, but the biggest obstacle isn't physical at all, it's cultural. For many Mongolians, Genghis Khan isn't just a historical figure, he's a national founder, a spiritual symbol, and to many, sacred. Burkhan Khaldun isn't viewed as a dig site, it's viewed as holy ground. The Mongolian government has repeatedly restricted excavation in the region, and many citizens have pushed back hard against foreign expeditions attempting to search there. There's a widespread belief that disturbing the tomb would be a curse, not superstition to them, but a genuine act of disrespect toward a national ancestor. So even if archaeologists knew the exact coordinates, there's a real chance they still wouldn't be allowed to dig. We're closer than ever to solving this mystery and still no closer to opening it. Imagine tomorrow morning the news breaks. Genghis Khan's tomb has finally been found. What would actually be inside? Historians believe an intact tomb could hold extraordinary artifacts, weapons and armor from the height of the Mongol military machine, treasures collected from conquered civilizations across Asia and the Middle East, and possibly horse burials, since horses held deep spiritual meaning in Mongol culture. There's also a genetic angle. Some research using indirect genetic evidence has suggested roughly 1 in every 200 men alive today may carry a Y chromosome lineage linked to Genghis Khan's family line, a claim that remains debated among geneticists, but one that hints at just how far his bloodline may have spread. The greatest treasure hunt in history might already be standing on top of its prize, but here's a twist almost nobody considers. What if finding the tomb would actually be a mistake? The greatest archaeological discovery of the century could also destroy one of Mongolia's most sacred protected places. Many Mongolians believe the site should remain exactly as it's been for 800 years, untouched, unmapped, and left alone. Archaeologists argue the opposite, that careful, respectful excavation could preserve irreplaceable history before erosion, looting, or time destroys it forever, and that discovery doesn't have to mean disrespect. There's no clean answer here. Both sides are arguing from genuine respect. They're just aimed in opposite directions. Maybe that tension is part of why this mystery has survived so long. It's not only that we can't find the tomb, it's that perhaps we're not supposed to. After 8 centuries of searching, here's the answer, not because nobody tried. Governments, universities, and independent researchers have poured decades and small fortunes into this search, armed with technology that would have looked like sorcery in the 13th century. It's because everything about his burial, the secrecy, the terrain, the missing records, and the cultural protection surrounding that land today, was built layer upon layer across 8 centuries specifically to make sure this never happened. Empires rose, empires fell. Technology transformed the world, but one grave never surrendered its secret. 800 years ago, a funeral procession disappeared into these mountains. Every empire since has failed to follow it. And 8 centuries later, Genghis Khan is still winning.